She was told to end the pregnancy. Instead, she became mother of the billionaire CEO's secret twins. You have until tomorrow to schedule the procedure, Rebecca. Maxwell Westlake's voice cut through the silence like ice. Nothing like the man who had whispered love against her skin just weeks before. If you choose those cells over your career, I'll make sure you never work in medical research again. The sunset painted the cliff edge in hues of gold and crimson as Rebecca Morgan stood at the precipice, her lab coat still on, the positive pregnancy test trembling in her hand. Tears streamed down her face, not of joy, but of terror. Have you ever faced a moment when someone tried to force you to choose between two things you desperately wanted, when the path forward seemed impossible? They're not just cells, Maxwell. There are children. Rebecca's voice shook, her hand instinctively moving to her stomach. They're a liability, his voice hardened. A distraction from what matters. Your research is worth billions. These complications are not part of our arrangement. Our arrangement? Rebecca's eyes flashed with sudden anger. I thought we had more than an arrangement. Maxwell's laugh was hollow. Don't be naive. It doesn't suit a woman of your intelligence. Before this unfolds, who here hasn't subscribed yet? If this opening already hits you hard, don't leave without subscribing. Like this video if you believe no woman should ever be forced into an impossible decision. And comment, I stand with Rebecca, to show your support. What would you do if someone demanded you sacrifice your unborn children for your career? The choice Rebecca made that day would change not just her life, but the future of medicine itself. 25 years later, Rebecca stood in the back of a crowded auditorium, her heart swelling with a complex mixture of pride and vindication. On stage, two young men with identical chiseled features accepted the Global Innovation Award. Their research had revolutionized genetic medicine, saving countless lives, including those with the rare condition that ran in their biological father's family. We dedicate this award to our mother, said Adrian, the more outspoken of the twins, who taught us that the greatest breakthroughs come not from choosing between humanity and science, but from embracing both. Aiden, quieter but equally commanding, added, she showed us that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. As applause thundered through the hall, Rebecca closed her eyes. The journey from that cliff edge to this moment had been longer and harder than anyone could imagine. But she had made the right choice, for herself, for her sons, and ironically, for science itself. This is her story, one that begins with an impossible choice and ends with a revolution that no one could have predicted. Rebecca Morgan had always been exceptional. By 12, she could recite the periodic table backward. By 16, she had published her first research paper. By 24, she had earned her PhD in molecular biology with a focus on cancer research. But these achievements came at a cost. Did you know that sometimes our greatest strengths emerge from our deepest wounds? For Rebecca, science wasn't just a career, it was a mission born from personal tragedy. Orphaned at 12, when cancer claimed both her parents within months of each other, Rebecca bounced between foster homes, her only constant companion being her textbooks. She didn't make friends easily. Her mind moved too quickly, her focus too intense for most peers to understand. But she didn't need their understanding. She needed to cure the disease that had stolen her family. Westlake Pharmaceuticals represented the pinnacle of cancer research. Getting hired there straight out of her doctoral program was like winning the lottery. Access to cutting-edge equipment, virtually unlimited funding, and the brightest minds in the field. The company's sleek glass headquarters in Boston seemed a world away from the cramped apartments and community college labs where she'd started her journey. Dr. Morgan, welcome to Westlake. The HR director's smile didn't reach her eyes as she handed Rebecca her security badge. Mr. Westlake himself requested you for the Prometheus project. That's unprecedented for a new hire. Rebecca clutched the badge, trying to contain her excitement. The Prometheus project? But that's the company's most advanced cancer research initiative. Indeed. The woman's smile tightened further. Just remember, at Westlake, results matter above all else. Mr. Westlake doesn't tolerate failure. What Rebecca didn't know was that her discovery wasn't worth millions. It was worth billions. And some people would destroy a life to protect that kind of money. The question wasn't whether her research would change the world, it was whether she would be allowed to complete it. Maxwell Westlake first appeared in Rebecca's lab 6 months after she started. At 38, he was already legendary, the youngest CEO in pharmaceutical history, a billionaire by 30, and notorious for his ruthless business tactics, disguised behind charitable donations and a dazzling smile. Dr. Morgan. His voice was warm honey, his handshake firm but not domineering. I've been following your work. Your approach to targeting cancer stem cells is revolutionary. Rebecca tried not to blush. Maxwell Westlake was objectively handsome, tall, with dark hair that held just enough silver at the temples to suggest wisdom rather than age. His eyes were an unusual shade of amber that seemed to shift in different lighting. Thank you, Mr. Westlake, but it's early days yet. We haven't even begun human trials. Call me Maxwell, please. He leaned against her lab bench with casual confidence. And I have a feeling about your research. You're going to change everything. Have you ever met someone who seemed to see your potential more clearly than you saw it yourself? Someone whose belief in you made you believe too? That's what Maxwell offered Rebecca. Recognition of her brilliance when the rest of the world had overlooked her. But recognition always comes with a price. Their first date happened 3 weeks later, a private dinner on the rooftop garden of Westlake's downtown penthouse. Rebecca had protested initially, citing ethical concerns about dating her boss, but Maxwell had waved them away. Technically, I'm everyone's boss, he'd said with a laugh. Should I never date again? Besides, your work stands on its own merit. No one would dare suggest otherwise. Under the stars, with the Boston skyline glittering around them, Rebecca found herself opening up about her childhood, her parents, her driving need to defeat cancer. Maxwell listened with an intensity that made her feel truly seen for perhaps the first time in her life. My father died of heart disease when I was in college, he confided, refilling her wine glass. There was a genetic component they couldn't treat then. That's partly why I built Westlake, to push medicine beyond its limitations. What he didn't mention was the same genetic condition lurked in his own DNA, a ticking time bomb that haunted his future plans. Some secrets are kept not just from others, but from ourselves, the truths we refuse to face until they can no longer be denied. By their 3rd month of dating, Rebecca had practically moved into Maxwell's penthouse. Her own apartment, a tiny 1-bedroom in a graduate housing complex, remained only as storage for the books and research papers she couldn't bear to part with. Rebecca's cramped apartment told the story of a life dedicated to science rather than comfort. Stacks of journal articles covered every surface. Her refrigerator contained nothing but yogurt, energy drinks, and forgotten takeout containers. The only personal touches were a faded photograph of her parents on their last vacation together and a small collection of sea glass she'd gathered as a child during a rare happy foster placement near the coast. At Westlake, Rebecca's days stretched into nights. The Prometheus project was consuming her life, but she didn't mind. Her approach, targeting a specific protein that allowed cancer stem cells to evade traditional treatments, was showing remarkable results in the lab. Mice that should have died within weeks were thriving months later. Their tumors not just shrinking, but disappearing entirely. You need to slow down, cautioned Dr. Eliza Chen, the senior researcher who had become Rebecca's mentor and closest thing to a friend. At 55, Eliza had been at Westlake since its founding, and was one of the few people who seemed unintimidated by Maxwell. I can't slow down, Rebecca replied, not looking up from her microscope. We're too close. Eliza placed a gentle hand on Rebecca's shoulder. Science is a marathon, not a sprint. And Maxwell, he has expectations that can be difficult to meet. Rebecca finally looked up. What do you mean? Eliza hesitated. Just be careful. Remember that your work belongs to Westlake, not to you. And Maxwell, he sees people as assets or liabilities, nothing in between. How many warnings do we ignore when we're blinded by love or ambition? The red flags are often visible to everyone but ourselves, waving frantically in our peripheral vision while we stare straight ahead. Rebecca had brushed off the warning. After all, Maxwell had shown her nothing but support and affection. When she worked late, he sent dinner to her lab. When she made breakthroughs, he celebrated with champagne and weekend getaways. When she doubted herself, he reminded her of her brilliance. But there were signs she chose to ignore. The way his mood darkened when her research hit inevitable setbacks. The subtle pressure to work harder, longer, faster. The occasional comments about competing research teams that had been let go after failing to produce results. Maxwell expects excellence, his executive assistant had told her once, with a tight smile. Those who can't provide it don't last long here. The morning sickness started 6 months into their relationship. Rebecca dismissed it as stress or perhaps a mild stomach virus. She couldn't afford to be sick, not when her research was at such a critical juncture. The mice trials were complete, and they were preparing for the first phase of human testing. Her treatment could potentially save millions of lives. It was Eliza who finally confronted her, cornering her in the women's restroom after finding Rebecca vomiting for the 3rd morning that week. "When was your last period?" Eliza asked bluntly. Rebecca blinked, trying to remember. With her irregular cycle and workaholic schedule, she rarely kept track. I'm not sure. 6 weeks? Maybe 8? Eliza pressed a small package into Rebecca's hand. A pregnancy test. Take it. Now. 20 minutes later, Rebecca stared at the 2 pink lines with a mixture of shock, fear, and, surprising even herself, joy. A baby. Her baby. Maxwell's baby. "What are you going to do?" Eliza asked, her expression carefully neutral. "I'm going to tell Maxwell, of course," Rebecca replied, already imagining his reaction. Would he be surprised? Pleased? Would this accelerate the marriage conversations they'd begun having recently? Eliza's face remained troubled. "Just prepare yourself, Rebecca. Children aren't part of Maxwell's 5-year plan." "Plans change," Rebecca said confidently. "This might not be the timing we would have chosen, but it's happening. We'll adjust." Have you ever experienced that moment of perfect hope before reality crashes in? That brief window when you believe everything will work out, just before you learn how wrong you are? She decided to wait until that evening to tell him, planning a special dinner at the penthouse. She even left work early, a rare occurrence, to prepare his favorite meal. As she chopped vegetables in his designer kitchen, her hand occasionally drifted to her still flat stomach. A baby. A tiny life created from their love. Maxwell arrived home later than expected, his expression stormy as he loosened his tie. "Bad day?" Rebecca asked, moving to pour him his usual scotch. "The board is breathing down my neck about the Prometheus timeline," he muttered, accepting the glass. "Novartis is getting close to a competing treatment. We need to accelerate." Rebecca took a deep breath. "Actually, I wanted to talk to you about something that might affect the timeline." Maxwell's eyes narrowed slightly. "What do you mean?" "I'm pregnant," she said, the words tumbling out before she could craft a gentler announcement. "About 2 months along, I think." The silence that followed seemed to stretch for eternity. Maxwell's face went completely blank, not angry, not happy, just empty. Then he set down his glass with deliberate care. "I see," he said finally. "And you're certain?" "I took a test this morning. I'll need to see a doctor to confirm, but yes, I'm pretty certain." Maxwell nodded slowly. "Well, these things happen. We'll handle it." Rebecca felt a chill at his phrasing. "Handle it?" "I know an excellent doctor, very discreet. He can take care of it tomorrow, and you can be back at work the following day. No one needs to know." The room seemed to tilt beneath Rebecca's feet. "Take care of it? Maxwell, I'm not talking about a problem that needs solving. This is our baby." His expression hardened. "Rebecca, be reasonable. You're at a critical point in your research. The board is expecting results within months, not years. A pregnancy would derail everything you've worked for." "I can work through most of the pregnancy," she argued, her hand protectively covering her stomach, "and take just a short maternity leave. Many scientists manage to balance." "Not at Westlake," Maxwell cut her off. "Not on Prometheus. This project requires your complete focus and commitment." "This is our child," Rebecca repeated, her voice rising. "Doesn't that mean anything to you?" Maxwell's laugh was short and humorless. "It's a cluster of cells, Rebecca. Don't let sentimentality cloud your scientific judgment. You of all people should understand the practical realities here." Rebecca felt tears threatening but forced them back. "I thought you loved me." "I do love you," he said, his voice softening as he approached her. "That's why I'm trying to protect your career. Your research could save millions of lives. Would you really sacrifice that for one unplanned pregnancy? When he put it that way, doubt crept in. Was she being selfish? Irrational? Was her personal desire for motherhood less important than her work's potential to save countless lives? "I need time to think," she said finally. Maxwell's jaw tightened. "We don't have time, Rebecca. Every day of delay puts us behind Novartis. I've scheduled the appointment for tomorrow afternoon. My driver will take you." "You what?" Shock gave way to anger. "You made that decision without even discussing it with me?" "I'm making the decision that you seem unable to make," he replied coldly. "This is bigger than your temporary maternal feelings. This is about your life's work." Rebecca stepped back, suddenly seeing Maxwell with new clarity. "This isn't your decision to make. It's my body. My choice." "Then choose wisely," Maxwell said, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. "Because if you choose to continue this pregnancy, you're choosing to end your career at Westlake. And I promise you, no other pharmaceutical company or research institution will touch you after I'm done. Your research will die on the vine, and those millions of potential patients will suffer because you couldn't make a rational decision." The threat hung in the air between them. Rebecca felt her world collapsing. Everything she'd worked for, everything she'd sacrificed, her entire professional future, balanced against the tiny life growing inside her. "You have until tomorrow to schedule the procedure," Maxwell said, his voice returning to its normal business-like tone. "I suggest you make the right choice." He walked out, leaving Rebecca alone in the kitchen, the half-prepared dinner forgotten on the counter. How many of us have faced moments when the path forward seems impossible? When every choice involves sacrifice too great to bear? For Rebecca, this wasn't just about a career versus motherhood. It was about her life's purpose versus a new life beginning. The next morning, Rebecca arrived at her lab earlier than usual, her eyes red from a sleepless night. She had until 2 p.m. to decide. The appointment Maxwell had made was for 3 p.m., less than 6 hours to make an impossible choice. She went through the motions of her work, checking cultures and reviewing data, but her mind was elsewhere, on the cliff edge of her future, with no clear path forward. "You look terrible," Eliza said bluntly, appearing at Rebecca's side around 10 a.m. "Did you tell him?" Rebecca nodded, not trusting herself to speak. "And?" Eliza prompted. "He wants me to terminate," Rebecca whispered. "Today. He says if I don't, I'm fired. And he'll make sure I never work in research again." Eliza's face darkened with anger. "That bastard." "What should I do, Eliza?" Rebecca asked, desperation in her voice. "This research is everything I've worked for. It could save so many people. Am I being selfish if I choose to keep the baby? Have you ever noticed how the most important decisions in life rarely come with clear answers? We search for certainty in a world of gray, hoping someone will tell us which path is right." Eliza glanced around to ensure they were alone, then pulled Rebecca into the small conference room adjacent to the lab. Once the door was closed, her professional demeanor cracked. "Listen to me carefully, Rebecca. You are not the first woman Maxwell has put in this position." Rebecca stared at her. "What?" "There have been others, at least 3 that I know of. Research assistants, a marketing executive, even one of the board members' daughters who interned here. Maxwell has a pattern." "Did they all terminate?" "Yes. And do you know what happened afterward? They were all gone within 6 months anyway. Different reasons. Project cancellations, performance issues, budget cuts, but the result was the same. He discards people when they're no longer useful or convenient." Rebecca felt sick. "Why didn't you warn me? Would you have believed me?" Eliza asked gently. "When you're in his orbit, it's hard to see clearly. I tried to hint, but..." She sighed. "The truth is, Maxwell sees people as means to an end. Right now, you're valuable because of your research. This pregnancy threatens that value." "But my research is legitimate," Rebecca protested. "The results speak for themselves." "Yes, but there's something you don't know." Eliza lowered her voice further. "Your treatment would make Westlake's current flagship drug obsolete, Crestofen, but that's their biggest revenue generator." "Exactly. Over $4 billion in sales last year alone. Your treatment would be more effective, but it would cannibalize their existing market. The board is divided. Some want to fast-track your research as the future of the company. Others, including Maxwell's closest allies, want to slow-walk it while they extract maximum profit from Crestofen. Rebecca's mind raced. So when Maxwell says Novartis is close to a competing treatment, it's a lie, Eliza confirmed. They're at least 2 years behind your work. Maxwell is playing both sides, pushing you to develop the treatment while assuring the old guard that they'll control the timeline of its release. And now I'm pregnant, Rebecca said slowly, which gives him the perfect excuse to delay my research without revealing his true motives. Or to push you out entirely if you don't comply with his demands, Eliza added grimly. Sometimes the truth doesn't set you free. It just reveals the bars of a different cage. But knowledge, however painful, is the first step toward real choice. Rebecca sank into a chair, her mind reeling. Why are you telling me this now? Because you need all the facts to make your decision, Eliza said. And because I've been complicit in Maxwell's games for too long. I've watched him destroy careers and lives while I stood by, telling myself I was protecting my own position to do good science. She placed a hand on Rebecca's shoulder. Don't make the same mistake I did. Don't let him control your life. Rebecca's phone buzzed with a text from Maxwell. Car will pick you up at 2:30. Don't be late. She stared at the message, anger replacing her confusion. I need to protect my research and my baby. Babies, Eliza corrected quietly. Rebecca looked up sharply. What? I took the liberty of scheduling you for an ultrasound this morning. The technician owes me a favor and won't record it officially. Eliza handed her a small envelope. You're carrying twins, Rebecca. With trembling hands, Rebecca opened the envelope and pulled out the grainy ultrasound image. 2 tiny forms. 2 flickering heartbeats. Twins. The revelation hit her with physical force. I can't let him take this from me, she whispered. Any of it. My research or my children. Then don't, Eliza said firmly. But you need to be smart. Maxwell is powerful and vindictive. How many of us have felt that moment when everything changes? When what seemed impossible suddenly becomes the only possible path forward. When twins are involved, the stakes double, but so does the resolve. For the next hour, they formulated a plan. Rebecca would need to secure her research, gather evidence of Maxwell's duplicity, and prepare for the inevitable confrontation. Most importantly, she needed to protect herself and her unborn children from Maxwell's reach. I have a contact at the patent office, Eliza said. We can file provisional patents under your name, not Westlake's. Your employment contract has a loophole for discoveries made using novel approaches, not directly funded by company resources. But that's all my recent work, Rebecca protested. The protein pathway identification was entirely my methodology. Exactly. We document everything. Create a paper trail showing your independent contributions. It won't stop Maxwell completely, but it will give you leverage. By noon, Rebecca had begun systematically backing up her research to secure servers outside Westlake's network. By 1 p.m., she had drafted patent applications with Eliza's help, and by 2 p.m., she had made her decision. When her phone buzzed again, Maxwell, reminding her the car was waiting. Rebecca took a deep breath and typed her response. I won't be needing the car or the appointment. I choose my children. His reply came seconds later. Then you've chosen to end your career. Security will escort you out. Don't bother coming back tomorrow. Rebecca felt strangely calm as she packed her personal items. The security guard who appeared at her lab door looked uncomfortable with his assignment. I'm sorry, Doctor. Morgan, he mumbled. I need to escort you to the exit and collect your badge. It's all right, Jim, she said kindly. Just doing your job. As they walked through the building, Rebecca held her head high despite the curious stares of colleagues. At the main entrance, she handed over her badge without protest. Good luck, Dr. Morgan, Jim said quietly. For what it's worth, a lot of us think you're the real genius here, not him. Outside, the late afternoon sun was blinding after hours in the fluorescent-lit lab. Rebecca stood on the sidewalk, suddenly untethered. No job, no home. Since she'd been living in Maxwell's penthouse, her entire professional future threatened, and 2 tiny lives depending on her. She thought she would feel panic, but instead, a strange determination settled over her. She pulled out her phone and called the one person she knew would help. Eliza, It's done. I need a place to stay tonight. Already arranged, Eliza replied. And I've contacted someone who can help with the next steps. A lawyer who specializes in intellectual property and employment disputes. She's expecting your call. That night, in Eliza's spare bedroom, Rebecca finally allowed herself to cry, not from despair, but from the overwhelming realization of what she was undertaking. Single motherhood. A legal battle against one of the most powerful men in the pharmaceutical industry. Starting her career over from scratch. I must be insane, she whispered to her still flat stomach. But we're going to figure this out together. I promise. She thought she was choosing motherhood. She didn't realize she was lighting the fuse of a corporate war. If you're still with me, you understand what it means to face an impossible choice. To stand at the crossroads where every path forward requires sacrifice. But sometimes, the bravest choice is refusing to choose between two things that matter. The next morning brought a new shock. Rebecca's bank account, which should have contained her modest savings of about $30,000, now showed a balance of $2.5 million. What the hell? She gasped, staring at her phone. Eliza, bringing in coffee, peered over her shoulder. Interesting. It seems you have a guardian angel. This has to be a mistake, Rebecca said. Or worse, a trap. Maxwell could claim I stole company funds. The transfer originated from a Cayman Islands account, Eliza noted, examining the transaction details. Untraceable and perfectly timed. But who would? A knock at the door interrupted them. Eliza went to answer it, returning with a thick manila envelope. Courier just delivered this. No sender information. Inside the envelope, Rebecca found documents that made her blood run cold. Internal Westlake memos, discussing the suppression of her research. Emails between Maxwell and board members about the Prometheus containment strategy. And, most damning of all, medical records. These are genetic test results, Rebecca said, scanning the pages. Maxwell's genetic test results. He has Marfan-Westlake syndrome. Eliza's eyes widened. The rare connective tissue disorder? The one that killed his father? Yes, and it's hereditary. There's a 50% chance of passing it to children. Rebecca's hand went to her stomach. That's why he was so insistent about the termination. He doesn't just want to control my research. He wants to eliminate any evidence of his condition, which could affect Westlake's stock if it became public knowledge, Eliza added. A CEO with a potentially fatal genetic condition? The board would force him out. Another document caught Rebecca's attention. A report on surveillance operations. With growing horror, she realized Maxwell had been having her followed and monitored for months. Her apartment, her lab, even her occasional lunch meetings with colleagues, all under observation. He's been watching me, she whispered. And he won't stop now. As if confirming her fears, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Leave now. Security team en route to Chen residence. 10 minutes. Rebecca and Eliza moved with urgent efficiency, throwing essential items into bags. Within 5 minutes, they were in Eliza's car, pulling out of the garage just as a black SUV turned onto the street. Who's helping us? Rebecca asked as Eliza drove, carefully maintaining the speed limit despite their panic. I have my suspicions, Eliza replied, checking the rearview mirror. There's a faction within Westlake that opposes Maxwell's leadership. Board members who believe his personal vendettas are damaging the company. Like who? Dr. Lawrence Kwan, for one. He was Maxwell's father's personal physician and holds significant shares. He's been concerned about Maxwell's judgment for years. They drove to a small private airfield outside the city, where a nondescript jet waited. A man in a pilot's uniform approached as they parked. Dr. Morgan? Dr. Chen? We need to depart immediately. Where are we going? Rebecca asked, hesitating at the stairs to the jet. Harbor Point, the pilot replied. Small coastal town, very private. Arrangements have been made for your accommodation and security. Rebecca turned to Eliza. You're coming too, right? Eliza shook her head sadly. I can't. I need to stay and continue our work from the inside. Someone has to make sure your research isn't buried or misused. But Maxwell will know you helped me. You'll lose everything. I lost my integrity years ago by staying silent, Eliza said firmly. This is my chance to make it right. She embraced Rebecca tightly. Take care of yourself and those babies. I'll be in touch when it's safe. As the jet took off, Rebecca watched Boston's skyline recede. the Westlake Pharmaceuticals tower standing like a monolith among the other buildings. She had arrived there full of hope and ambition less than a year ago. Now she was fleeing like a fugitive, carrying not just her unborn children but the weight of a truth that could topple an empire. Have you ever had to start completely over? To leave behind everything familiar and build a new life from scratch? For Rebecca, this wasn't just about survival. It was about creating a future where both her children and her research could thrive. Harbor Point proved to be exactly what Rebecca needed. A small, close-knit community where newcomers were welcomed but not overwhelmed with questions. Her cover story was simple: a widow seeking a quiet place to raise her coming children. The cottage provided for her sat on a bluff overlooking the ocean, secluded enough for privacy but close enough to town for convenience. The mysterious benefactor had thought of everything. The cottage came with a fully equipped home laboratory in the converted garage. A local doctor, one with no ties to major medical institutions, was arranged to provide prenatal care. A security system with satellite monitoring ensured her safety. And the town's small medical clinic was happy to have a volunteer with Rebecca's expertise, no questions asked. "We don't get many specialists out here," said Dr. Martha Grayson, the clinic's aging physician, when Rebecca offered to help. "Most young doctors want big hospitals and bigger paychecks. What brings you to our little corner of nowhere?" "A fresh start," Rebecca replied simply, "and a place where my children can grow up safely." Dr. Grayson nodded, not pressing further. "Well, we're glad to have you, however long you stay." The pregnancy progressed without complications, though the morning sickness lasted well into Rebecca's second trimester. She continued her research in the home lab, communicating with Eliza through encrypted channels. The news from Boston was troubling. Maxwell had initiated legal action claiming theft of intellectual property, and Westlake's security team was still searching for her. "They've questioned everyone who ever worked with you," Eliza reported during one of their secure calls. "Maxwell is obsessed. This isn't just about the research anymore. It's personal." "Has he found out about the twins?" Rebecca asked, her hand resting on her now prominent belly. "No. As far as he knows, it was a single pregnancy, and he assumes you terminated elsewhere. Keep it that way." In her 7th month, Rebecca experienced a moment of pure terror when she spotted a black SUV parked near the clinic. She ducked into a shop, heart pounding, only to see the vehicle drive away minutes later with a local family inside. False alarm, but a stark reminder that she couldn't let her guard down. The twins were born on a stormy April night, with Dr. Grayson attending the birth at the cottage rather than the clinic. Another security precaution. 2 perfect boys, identical in every way except for the small birthmark on the second twin's shoulder. "Adrian and Aiden," Rebecca whispered, cradling them in the first quiet moment after the exhausting delivery. "Your lives began in chaos, but I promise you'll grow up knowing only love and security." As the boys grew from infants to toddlers, Rebecca established a careful routine. Mornings at the clinic, afternoons in her lab, evenings devoted entirely to her sons. The research progressed slowly but steadily. Without Westlake's resources, she had to be creative, but in some ways, the limitations forced innovations she might never have considered otherwise. When the twins were 2, Rebecca made her first major breakthrough. A modified version of her original treatment that showed even greater efficacy in targeting cancer stem cells. By the time they were 3, she had developed a working prototype that could be tested in clinical trials if she ever found a way to bring it to market. News from Boston came sporadically now. Eliza reported that Westlake Pharmaceuticals was struggling. Without Rebecca's research, their pipeline of new drugs had stalled. Crestofen, their flagship product, was facing competition from generic alternatives. Maxwell had become increasingly erratic, firing executives and researchers on mere suspicion of disloyalty. "The board is getting restless," Eliza said during one of their calls. "Maxwell's position isn't as secure as it once was. Dr. Kwan is quietly building a coalition against him." "Has he stopped looking for me?" Rebecca asked, watching through the window as the twins played in the garden, their dark hair, so like their father's, catching the sunlight. "No," Eliza admitted. "If anything, he's more determined. It's become an obsession. He has private investigators on retainer specifically for your case." When the twins turned 4, Rebecca made a calculated risk. Using a series of shell companies and the legal assistance provided by her anonymous benefactor, she filed for patents on her new treatment methodology. The applications were carefully structured to avoid direct links to her previous work at Westlake, focusing instead on the innovations she'd developed independently. By the time Adrian and Aiden started kindergarten, Rebecca had established a small research company, Morgan Therapeutics, operating remotely with a team of scientists who never knew her location. The company began the lengthy process of FDA approval for clinical trials, funded by the mysterious initial deposit that had grown through careful investment. Life in Harbor Point took on a comfortable rhythm. The twins thrived in the small local school, making friends and excelling academically. Rebecca became a fixture in the community, her volunteer work at the clinic expanding to include a free cancer screening program that saved dozens of lives. She dated occasionally, a high school science teacher, briefly, and later the owner of the local bookstore. But these relationships never progressed beyond casual companionship. The secret at the center of her life created a barrier she couldn't fully open to anyone. The twins grew to resemble Maxwell more with each passing year. The same amber eyes, the same sharp cheekbones, the same quick analytical minds, but their spirits were entirely their own. Adrian, born first by 7 minutes, was outgoing and confident, a natural leader even as a child. Aiden was quieter, more thoughtful, with a gentle empathy that reminded Rebecca of her own father. Think about the people in your life who shaped who you are today. Was it their DNA, or was it their daily presence, their values, their love? Nature provides the blueprint, but nurture writes the story. By their 10th birthday, both boys showed remarkable aptitude for science. Rebecca had converted part of the home lab into a space for their experiments, carefully guiding their natural curiosity while keeping certain aspects of her work private. They knew she was developing cancer treatments. That much was impossible to hide, but they didn't know the full story of their origins or the danger that still lurked in their past. "Mom, why don't we have a dad?" Adrian asked one evening as Rebecca helped them with a science project. The question, though inevitable, still caught her off guard. "Your father and I separated before you were born," she answered carefully. "He wasn't ready to be a parent." "Does he know about us?" Aiden asked, his perceptive eyes studying her face. "No," Rebecca said, deciding that partial truth was better than complete lies. "He made it clear he didn't want children in his life." "His loss," Adrian declared, with the simple confidence of childhood. "We're awesome." Rebecca laughed, ruffling his hair. "Yes, you are. The most awesome sons any mother could ask for." As the boys grew into teenagers, Rebecca's company achieved its first major milestone, FDA approval for Phase 1 clinical trials of MT-107, her revolutionary cancer treatment. The results exceeded even her most optimistic projections. Patients with advanced, treatment-resistant cancers showed remarkable improvement. By the end of Phase 2 trials, the medical community was buzzing about the Morgan miracle. What she didn't realize was that her sons weren't just her miracle. They were the future of the empire she once fled. Sometimes our greatest achievements come not from following the expected path, but from forging our own way through impossible circumstances. Rebecca's breakthrough might never have happened if she'd stayed at Westlake, constrained by corporate priorities and Maxwell's control. News of Morgan Therapeutics' success eventually reached Westlake Pharmaceuticals, now struggling to maintain its market position. Maxwell, still CEO but increasingly challenged by the board, became fixated on the small company's breakthrough treatment. "The methodology looks familiar," he told his research director, studying the published trial results. "Too familiar. Find out everything about this Dr. Rebecca Morgan." "Sir, we've already vetted her," the nervous director replied. Harvard Medical School graduate, independent researcher, no prior affiliation with major pharmaceutical companies. She's been operating out of the Northeast for about a decade. Maxwell slammed his fist on the desk. "It's her. It has to be. Find her, now." Back in Harbor Point, the twins were celebrating their 18th birthday and their acceptance to prestigious universities. Adrian to MIT for biochemical engineering. Aiden to Stanford for genetics and molecular biology. Rebecca had never been prouder or more terrified. Their departure for college would take them out from under her protective wing and into a world where their resemblance to Maxwell Westlake might be recognized. "Mom, we need to talk," Adrian said the evening after their birthday celebration. The serious tone in his usually carefree voice immediately put Rebecca on alert. The twins sat her down at the kitchen table, exchanging a look that communicated volumes between them. "We found something," Aiden said gently, placing a folder on the table. When we were looking for our birth certificates for college registration, Rebecca's heart sank as she opened the folder. Inside were newspaper clippings, printouts of scientific journal articles, and a photograph she thought she'd destroyed years ago. Her and Maxwell at a Westlake Company gala, his arm possessively around her waist. "Maxwell Westlake is our father, isn't he?" Adrian asked directly. Rebecca closed her eyes briefly, then nodded. "Yes. Why didn't you tell us?" Aiden's voice held no accusation, only quiet curiosity. Rebecca took a deep breath. "To protect you. And to protect my work." She looked from one son to the other, seeing Maxwell's features, but expressions entirely their own. "It's a long story, and not a pleasant one." For the next 2 hours, Rebecca told them everything. Her work at Westlake, her relationship with Maxwell, his ultimatum when she became pregnant, and her escape with Eliza's help. She explained about the mysterious benefactor who had made their new life possible, and about Maxwell's continued search for her over the years. "So our entire lives have been built on running from him," Adrian said, anger edging his voice. "We've been hiding like criminals when we did nothing wrong." "We weren't just hiding," Rebecca corrected gently. "We were living, building something positive from a difficult beginning, and my work has helped thousands of cancer patients who might otherwise have died." "Does he know about us, that we're twins?" Aiden asked. "No. As far as I know, he believes I terminated the pregnancy, as he demanded." The twins exchanged another of their silent communications. "There's something else you should know," Aiden said hesitantly. "I've been having some health issues, chest pain, joint problems. I did some research based on my symptoms, and then some genetic testing through an anonymous service." Rebecca felt cold dread spreading through her body. "What did you find?" "I have Marfan-Westlake syndrome," Aiden said quietly. "The same condition that killed our grandfather. The same condition our father has." Rebecca reached for his hand across the table. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I only confirmed it last week, and I wanted to understand more before worrying you." Aiden squeezed her hand. "The good news is that with proper management, it's not a death sentence anymore. The bad news is that Adrian should be tested too." "I'm fine," Adrian insisted. "No symptoms at all." "It can present differently, even in identical twins," Aiden countered. "You need to know." Rebecca's mind was racing. "This changes things." Maxwell's condition was one of the reasons he wanted to terminate the pregnancy. He didn't want to risk passing it on. "Well, he did," Adrian said bluntly. "And now what? We just keep hiding forever? Go to college under assumed names? Live our whole lives looking over our shoulders?" "No," Rebecca said firmly. "You're adults now. I can't make these decisions for you anymore. But please understand, Maxwell Westlake is a dangerous man when he feels threatened, and your existence threatens both his corporate image and his personal narrative." "We need to meet him," Aiden said suddenly. "Not just for closure, but because I need medical information, family history, treatment responses, progression patterns. This condition is rare enough that every case study matters." Rebecca felt panic rising. "There are other ways to get that information. We can." "Mom," Adrian interrupted, his expression determined. "We're not asking permission. We're telling you our decision. We want to meet our father." How many parents have faced that moment when their children assert their independence in ways that terrify them? When protection must give way to respect for their autonomy, even when every instinct screams to hold on tighter? Rebecca recognized the set of their jaws, the resolute look in their eyes, the same determination that had carried her through the darkest days of her own journey. They were her sons, but they were also their own people now. "Then we do this carefully," she said finally. "Very carefully." The plan they developed was methodical. The twins would apply for internships at Westlake Pharmaceuticals under their real names, Morgan. Common enough not to raise immediate suspicion, but their resumes would be impressive enough to reach executive-level review. Meanwhile, Rebecca would prepare for the inevitable confrontation, securing both her company and her research against potential retaliation. What she didn't tell the twins was her own secret project, a treatment for Marfan-Westlake syndrome that she had been developing quietly ever since discovering Maxwell's condition years ago. The therapy was experimental, using the same targeting mechanism as her cancer treatment, but modified to address the genetic mutation responsible for the syndrome. If it worked, it could save Aiden's life, and Maxwell's. As the twins prepared to leave for college, an unexpected message arrived from Eliza. Lawrence Kwan dead. Heart attack. Maxwell consolidating power. Be careful, Dr. Kwan. The board member Rebecca had long suspected was her anonymous benefactor, was gone. The timing couldn't be worse. Maybe we should wait, Rebecca suggested to the twins. With Dr. Kwan gone, Maxwell's position is stronger. He'll be more dangerous. Or more vulnerable, Adrian countered. New power dynamics create opportunities. Aiden nodded agreement. Besides, my condition isn't waiting. I need answers sooner rather than later. The twins left for college with their applications to Westlake's prestigious internship program already submitted. Rebecca threw herself into her work, accelerating the development of the Marfan Westlake treatment while continuing to expand her cancer therapy's reach. 3 months later, both Adrian and Aiden received acceptance emails from Westlake Pharmaceuticals. Their internships would begin during summer break. The countdown to confrontation had begun. If you've ever prepared for a moment that could change everything, a confrontation, a revelation, a leap of faith, you know the mixture of dread and determination that Rebecca felt. The past she had fled was about to collide with the future she had built. Rebecca spent the intervening months preparing, legally, financially, and emotionally. Morgan Therapeutics was now structured to withstand even the most aggressive corporate attack. Her patents were secure. And most importantly, she had completed preliminary testing on the Marfan Westlake treatment, with promising results. When the twins returned home for spring break, they found their mother changed, more confident, less fearful. I'm done running, she told them over dinner, their first night back. Whatever happens with Maxwell, it's time I stood my ground. Does that mean you're coming with us to Boston? Adrian asked, surprised. Not initially, Rebecca replied. You need to establish yourselves first, make your own impressions, but I'll be ready when the time comes. The twins exchanged glances. There's something we haven't told you, Aiden said. We've been in contact with someone at Westlake, someone who knew you. Rebecca tensed. Eliza? No, Adrian said. Dr. James Harrington. He was on the original Prometheus project. He recognized our names on the internship applications and reached out. James, Rebecca whispered. I thought he left Westlake years ago. He did, Aiden explained. But he came back recently as research director. He says the company is in trouble. Maxwell has become increasingly erratic. The board is close to forcing him out. And he knows who you are? Who your father is? Adrian nodded. He figured it out from our ages and our resemblance to Maxwell. He wants to help. Rebecca considered this new information carefully. James had been a friend during her time at Westlake. Though not a close confidant like Eliza, if he was now research director, he held significant influence. Can he be trusted? She asked. We think so, Aiden said. He's been very careful in his communications, and he seems genuinely concerned about both Westlake's future and our safety. The plan evolved with James's involvement. The twins would begin their internships as scheduled, but with an added layer of protection. James would ensure they were assigned to non-sensitive projects, away from Maxwell's direct attention, giving them time to assess the situation from inside. June arrived, and with it, the twins' departure for Boston. Rebecca drove them to the airport, her heart heavy with both pride and apprehension. Remember, she said as they prepared to board, no matter what happens, what he says or does, know that you were wanted. You were chosen. Every day of your lives, I've thanked the stars that I made the decision I did. We know, Mom, Aiden said, embracing her. And we're going to make you proud, Adrian added. It's time everyone knew the truth. Rebecca watched their plane take off, then returned to Harbor Point to wait. The next move would be Maxwell's, once he inevitably discovered who his new interns really were. The call came sooner than expected. Just 3 days into the internship, Rebecca's phone rang with an unknown Boston number. He knows, James Harrington said without preamble when she answered. Someone in HR made the connection. The twins' birth dates matched the timeline of your departure. Maxwell saw their personnel files this morning. Are they safe? Rebecca demanded, already moving to pack an emergency bag. For now, he's in shock, I think. He called them to his office, took one look at them, and dismissed everyone else. They've been in there for over an hour. I'm on my way, Rebecca said. Get them out of there if you can, but don't put yourself at risk. There's more, James added quickly. The board is meeting tomorrow. There's talk of a vote of no confidence in Maxwell's leadership. Your son's appearance couldn't have come at a more volatile time. Rebecca booked the first available flight to Boston, her mind racing with contingency plans. By the time she landed, the situation had escalated beyond anything she could have anticipated. News alerts flashed across her phone as she deplaned. Westlake Pharmaceuticals shares plummet amid leadership crisis. Twin interns claimed to be CEO's secret sons. Maxwell Westlake hospitalized after collapse. She called Adrian immediately. What happened? Are you both all right? We're fine, Adrian assured her, though his voice sounded strained. But it's chaos here. Maxwell had some kind of cardiac event during our meeting. They took him to Massachusetts General. Aiden went with him. He wanted to talk to the doctors about the Marfan-Westlake connection. And the news stories? How did this get out? Not from us, Adrian said firmly. Someone on the executive floor must have overheard and leaked it. By the time Maxwell collapsed, rumors were already spreading through the building. Rebecca took a deep breath. I'm here in Boston. Where should I meet you? The hospital, Adrian decided. Aiden says Maxwell is stabilized, but still in intensive care. And Mom, he's asking for you. Have you ever had to face someone who once tried to destroy you, only to find them vulnerable and dependent on your mercy? The tables had turned in ways Rebecca could never have imagined. Massachusetts General Hospital's VIP wing was heavily guarded, but James Harrington was waiting to escort Rebecca through security. The twins met her in a private waiting area, both looking exhausted but resolute. How bad is it? Rebecca asked, embracing them both. Aortic dissection, Aiden explained. A common complication of Marfan-Westlake. They've repaired it surgically, but his overall prognosis isn't good without more aggressive intervention. He knows who we are, Adrian added. He figured it out the moment we walked into his office. Said we have his mother's smile. Of all things. Rebecca nodded. It was true. Though the twins resembled Maxwell in coloring and build, their smiles came from her side. And how did he react? Shock, anger, then something else, Aiden said thoughtfully. Almost like relief? He started asking about our lives, our education. Then he clutched his chest and collapsed. A doctor approached their group. Miss Morgan, Mr. Westlake is asking for you. He's stable enough for a brief visit. Rebecca steeled herself and followed the doctor to the ICU. Maxwell lay connected to monitors and IV lines, looking pale and diminished against the white hospital sheets. The powerful, intimidating man who had once threatened to destroy her career now appeared fragile, mortal. His eyes opened as she approached the bed. Rebecca, he whispered, you came. Not for you, she replied evenly, for my sons. A ghost of his old smile crossed his face. Our sons! They're remarkable. You did well. No thanks to you. Maxwell's expression sobered. I deserved that. I deserved worse. He gestured weakly to the chair beside the bed. Please, I don't have the strength to argue. Rebecca sat reluctantly, maintaining her distance. What do you want, Maxwell? To understand, he said simply. All these years, where were you? How did you manage to hide so completely? I had help, Rebecca replied. People who believed in me and my work. People who understood what you couldn't, that some things are more important than profit margins and corporate image. Maxwell was quiet for a moment, the only sound the steady beep of his heart monitor. Your company, Morgan Therapeutics. The cancer treatment. That was the Prometheus research, wasn't it? A version of it, Rebecca acknowledged. Improved. Refined. Without Westlake's resources, I had to be more creative. It's brilliant work, Maxwell admitted. The board wanted to acquire your company. They had no idea it was you. His laugh turned into a painful cough. The irony is exquisite. Rebecca leaned forward slightly. Maxwell, Aiden has your condition. The news visibly shook him. Both twins? No, just Aiden. But I've been working on a treatment, a genetic therapy that targets the specific mutation. Early results are promising. Hope flickered in Maxwell's eyes. Could it help me? Possibly. It's experimental, but the mechanism is sound. Rebecca studied him carefully. Why should I help you? After everything you did? Life has a way of bringing us full circle, doesn't it? 18 years ago, Maxwell gave Rebecca an impossible choice. Now she held his future in her hands. What would you do in her position? Maxwell closed his eyes briefly. I don't deserve your help, but those boys, our sons, deserve to know their father, the real man, not the monster who threatened their mother. He opened his eyes again, meeting her gaze directly. I've lived with the consequences of my choices, Rebecca. The company is failing. The board is voting tomorrow on my removal. I have no family, no real friends, just wealth and power that mean nothing when you're dying alone. Rebecca felt her resolve wavering, not from any lingering affection for Maxwell, but from the realization that hatred and resentment had been her companions for too long. I'll consider allowing you into the treatment protocol, but there are conditions. Name them, Maxwell said immediately. First, you acknowledge Adrian and Aiden publicly, on your terms, but with no shame or secrecy. Second, you resign from Westlake voluntarily, with a recommendation that the board consider a merger with Morgan Therapeutics. Third, you establish a foundation for research into rare genetic disorders, with Aiden having significant input into its direction. Maxwell considered these terms, and in return, you get a chance at a longer life, and a relationship with your sons, if they want one. That part is entirely their decision. Before Maxwell could respond, commotion erupted in the hallway. Rebecca turned to see Eliza Chen being escorted by security, the twins following close behind. Let her through, Maxwell called weakly. She's authorized. Eliza entered the room, her expression a complex mixture of emotions as she looked from Rebecca to Maxwell. Well, the prodigal researcher returns. Eliza, Rebecca embraced her old friend. What are you doing here? Warning you, Eliza said grimly. The board meeting has been moved up. They're voting tonight on Maxwell's removal and the company's direction. There's a faction pushing to file immediate legal action against Morgan Therapeutics, claiming intellectual property theft. Maxwell struggled to sit up. They can't do that without my approval. They can if you're deemed medically incapacitated, Eliza countered, which, given your current condition, wouldn't be difficult to establish. The twins entered the room, tension evident in their postures. Mom, Adrian said urgently, we need to move quickly. James says there are already lawyers drafting the paperwork. Rebecca made a swift decision. Maxwell, we don't have time for negotiations. Either you help us stop this now, or everything falls apart, including your chance at treatment. Maxwell nodded weakly. Get me a phone. And help me sit up. If I'm going down, it will be on my terms, not theirs. Sometimes the most unlikely alliances form in moments of crisis. People who once stood on opposite sides find themselves fighting together against a common threat. What followed was a masterclass in corporate maneuvering. From his hospital bed, Maxwell made a series of calls, activating proxy votes, and leveraging old alliances. Rebecca provided documentation of her independent research developments. Eliza contributed internal evidence of the board's duplicity. And the twins, with their fresh perspective and undeniable connection to the Westlake legacy, offered a compelling vision for the company's future. By midnight, a new plan had emerged, one that would reshape not just Westlake Pharmaceuticals, but the entire approach to medical research and treatment development. The board meeting the next morning was unlike any in Westlake's history. Held in Maxwell's hospital suite against medical advice, it began with a bombshell. Maxwell Westlake's public acknowledgement of Adrian and Aiden as his sons, followed by his resignation as CEO. For years, I've led this company with profit as the primary goal, Maxwell told the stunned board members. Today, I'm proposing a different path forward, one that honors innovation, integrity, and genuine human impact. The proposal was audacious, a merger between Westlake Pharmaceuticals and Morgan Therapeutics, with Rebecca as Chief Scientific Officer and James Harrington as Interim CEO. A significant portion of company resources would be redirected to the newly established Westlake Morgan Foundation for Genetic Research, with both commercial and humanitarian applications of new treatments. This isn't just about saving Westlake, Rebecca explained to the board. It's about creating something better, a company that values scientific breakthrough and human well-being equally. The debate was heated, with old guard board members resisting the radical restructuring. But the combination of Maxwell's remaining influence, the twins' undeniable brilliance, and the market reality of Westlake's declining position eventually tipped the scales. By a narrow margin, the board approved the merger and restructuring plan. As the board members filed out, some shell-shocked and others cautiously optimistic, Rebecca found herself alone with Maxwell for the first time since their confrontation began. "Why did you really do it?" she asked quietly. "After all these years of fighting to maintain control, why give it up now?" Maxwell's gaze drifted to the doorway where Adrian and Aiden stood talking with James Harrington. "They have my ambition, but your heart," he said finally. "What I built was always going to crumble eventually because it was founded on the wrong principles. What they could build together might actually last." "And us?" Rebecca asked. "What happens between us now?" "Nothing happens between us," Maxwell replied with unexpected clarity. "That chapter ended 18 years ago when I gave you an impossible choice. But perhaps we can write a new chapter as reluctant allies for their sake." He gestured toward the twins. "They deserve to know both their parents, flawed as we are." Rebecca nodded slowly. "I can accept that, but trust will take time." "Time is something I'm suddenly very interested in having more of," Maxwell said with a wry smile, glancing at his medical monitors. "Your treatment. How soon could we begin trials?" "The protocols are ready," Rebecca admitted. "I've been refining them for years, ever since I learned about your condition." Aiden's diagnosis only accelerated the timeline. "You developed a treatment for the man who threatened to destroy you?" Maxwell asked, genuine surprise in his voice. "I developed it for my son," Rebecca corrected. "The fact that it might help you is incidental." Maxwell laughed weakly, still as direct as ever. "It was always one of your most infuriating qualities." His expression sobered. "And one of your best. If you're still with me, you understand something profound about human nature, that even our deepest wounds can become sources of healing, not just for ourselves, but for others." Rebecca's determination to save her son led her to create a treatment that might save the very man who once tried to destroy her. The following weeks brought whirlwind changes. The merger announcement sent Westlake stock soaring as investors recognized the potential of combining the company's resources with Morgan Therapeutics' innovative approaches. Rebecca divided her time between setting up the new research structure and overseeing the first human trial of her Marfan-Westlake treatment, with both Aiden and Maxwell as participants. The twins delayed their return to college for a semester, choosing instead to work directly with the transition team. Their unique position, heirs to the Westlake legacy but raised with Rebecca's values, made them ideal bridges between the old company culture and the new vision. "It's strange," Aiden commented to Rebecca one evening as they reviewed the treatment data together. "6 months ago, I was worried about hiding my condition. Now I'm helping pioneer its treatment." "And how do you feel about Maxwell?" Rebecca asked carefully. She had been cautious not to influence her son's developing relationship with their father, allowing them to form their own opinions. Aiden considered the question thoughtfully. "He's not the monster from your stories, but he's not entirely the reformed man he's presenting either. He's complicated, brilliant, but damaged, capable of both cruelty and surprising generosity." "That's a fair assessment," Rebecca acknowledged. "People rarely fit into simple categories of good or bad." "The treatment is working for him," Aiden added. "His latest scans show significant improvement in aortic wall integrity. My results are even better." Rebecca felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The treatment's success meant Aiden wouldn't face the same shortened lifespan that had driven Maxwell's ruthless ambition. "And Adrian? How is he handling everything?" "You know Adrian?" Aiden smiled. "He's already planning how to expand the foundation's reach globally. He and Maxwell actually work well together when they're not butting heads over methodology." How many of us have discovered that our children sometimes understand complex situations with more clarity and compassion than we can? The twins' ability to see Maxwell as neither villain nor hero, but as a flawed human being, showed a wisdom beyond their years. 5 years passed with remarkable speed. The merged company, now simply called Morgan Westlake, had become a leader not just in pharmaceutical development, but in a new model of medical research that prioritized accessibility alongside profitability. The Marfan-Westlake treatment had moved from experimental to approved therapy, saving thousands of lives. and the foundation had expanded its focus to dozens of rare genetic disorders previously considered untreatable. Maxwell, his health stabilized by Rebecca's treatment, had stepped back from direct business involvement to focus on the foundation's work. His relationship with the twins had evolved into something neither Rebecca nor Maxwell could have predicted. A genuine mentorship, tempered by the twins' independent spirits and moral clarity. Rebecca herself had found an unexpected peace. The anger and fear that had driven her for so many years had gradually transformed into something more productive. A determined focus on creating the future she had always envisioned, where medical breakthroughs served humanity rather than merely generating profit. On a clear autumn day, Rebecca found herself once again standing on a cliff edge, this time with Adrian and Aidan beside her. The spot overlooked the Harbor Point coastline, where they had built their life in hiding. The small cottage still stood, though it was now used primarily as a weekend retreat from their busy lives in Boston. "I used to come to a place like this when I first found out I was pregnant with you," Rebecca told them, watching the waves crash against the rocks below. "I was terrified, facing an impossible choice between my life's work and my unborn children. You chose us," Adrian said simply, "and still managed to do the work," Aidan added. "You never had to choose between science and humanity. You showed it's possible to honor both." Rebecca smiled at her sons, brilliant, compassionate men who carried the best of her determination and none of Maxwell's ruthlessness. The real miracle wasn't the scientific breakthroughs or even surviving Maxwell's threats. It was watching you both grow into men who understand that power comes with responsibility and that true success is measured by impact, not wealth. "Speaking of impact," Adrian said, checking his watch, "we should head back. The Foundation's annual meeting starts in 2 hours, and you're giving the keynote." As they turned to leave, Rebecca paused for one last look at the horizon. 18 years ago, she had stood at a different cliff edge, facing what seemed like the end of everything she had worked for. Instead, it had been just the beginning of a journey far more meaningful than she could have imagined. That evening, as Rebecca took the podium at the Morgan Westlake Foundation's annual gala, she surveyed the audience. Eliza Chen sat in the front row, now the Foundation's ethics director. James Harrington, who had guided the company through its transition before retiring, sat beside her. The twins were near the stage, their presence a constant reminder of the choice that had changed everything. And in the back, partially obscured but unmistakable, sat Maxwell Westlake. Older now, humbled by illness and the recognition of his past mistakes, but still an undeniable part of the story that had brought them all to this moment. 18 years ago, Rebecca began, I was given an impossible choice, my career or my children. I was told I couldn't have both, that I had to sacrifice one for the other. She paused, meeting Maxwell's gaze briefly across the crowded room. That ultimatum was based on a false premise, that progress and humanity are somehow opposing forces, that we must choose between advancement and compassion. The audience was silent, captivated. What I discovered instead was that our greatest breakthroughs come precisely when we refuse to make that choice. When we insist that scientific progress must serve human flourishing, not just corporate profit. When we recognize that the most valuable discoveries aren't just the ones that generate patents, but the ones that transform lives. Rebecca gestured to the twins. My sons taught me that lesson every day of their lives. And now, through this foundation and through Morgan Westlake's new approach to medical research, we're teaching it to the world. The applause was thunderous. As Rebecca stepped away from the podium, she caught Maxwell's eye again. He nodded once, a simple acknowledgement of the journey they had taken, from adversaries to reluctant allies in service of something greater than either of them had envisioned alone. Later, as the gala wound down, Rebecca found herself on the venue's terrace, taking a moment of quiet amid the evening's celebrations. Maxwell joined her, moving more slowly than in his prime, but with his health largely restored by her treatment. Quite a speech, he said, leaning against the railing beside her. Though you left out the part where I was the villain. Rebecca smiled slightly. The story isn't that simple anymore, is it? You were the villain, yes, but also the catalyst. Without your ultimatum, I might never have found the courage to forge my own path. A generous interpretation, Maxwell acknowledged. But we both know I was wrong. About you. About what was possible. He looked back toward the ballroom. where the twins were deep in conversation with a group of researchers. They're extraordinary. Everything I might have been if I'd made different choices. They're their own people, Rebecca corrected gently. Not just reflections of us. True. Maxwell was quiet for a moment. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I'd made a different choice back then? If I'd supported your pregnancy? If we'd stayed together? Rebecca considered the question. Sometimes. But I don't think it would have worked. We wanted different things from life, from science. The conflict would have come eventually, just in a different form. Perhaps, Maxwell conceded. Or perhaps I would have learned sooner what took me losing everything to understand. That legacy isn't about control or even achievement. It's about impact. Well, your impact will live on through the foundation, Rebecca said. And through Adrian and Aiden, whether you deserve that privilege or not. Maxwell nodded, accepting both the acknowledgement and the implicit criticism. I've made my peace with that. I don't deserve their forgiveness, or yours, but I'm grateful for the chance to be part of their lives now, on whatever terms they set. As they stood in companionable silence, Adrian approached from the ballroom. Mom, they're asking for you inside. The governor wants to discuss expanding the foundation's work to state hospitals. I'll be right there, Rebecca promised. As Adrian turned to go, he hesitated, then addressed Maxwell. You should join us. Your experience with hospital boards would be valuable. The simple invitation, professional, not personal, but an invitation nonetheless, seemed to affect Maxwell deeply. I'd be honored, he said, his voice uncharacteristically humble. Rebecca watched them walk back inside together, her son and his father. Not close, but no longer enemies. The journey from that cliff edge 18 years ago had been longer and harder than she could have imagined, with twists she never anticipated. But standing here now, seeing all they had built from that moment of terrible choice, she knew without doubt that she had chosen correctly. She had been told to end her pregnancy or end her career. Instead, she had refused the false dichotomy and forged a third path. One that ultimately transformed not just her own life, but countless others through the work she and her sons had accomplished. If you've ever faced an impossible choice, remember Rebecca's story. Sometimes the bravest answer isn't choosing between two vital things, but finding a way to honor both, even when everyone tells you it can't be done. As Rebecca rejoined the gala, moving through the crowd of scientists, doctors, patients, and advocates whose lives had been touched by her decision so many years ago, she felt a sense of completion. The circle that began with a positive pregnancy test and tears of fear had transformed into something beautiful. A legacy of courage, innovation, and the unshakable belief that when faced with an impossible choice, sometimes the bravest answer is simply both. 10 years after the merger that transformed the pharmaceutical industry, Rebecca Morgan stood at the podium of the Global Medical Innovation Summit, her silver-streaked hair gleaming under the spotlight. At 67, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of a woman who had changed the world not once, but twice. First with her groundbreaking cancer treatment, and then with the genetic therapy that had revolutionized treatment for Marfan-Westlake syndrome and dozens of related disorders. Innovation isn't just about discovery, she told the assembled medical leaders from around the world. It's about accessibility, about ensuring that breakthroughs reach those who need them most, regardless of wealth or geography. In the front row, Adrian and Aiden, now accomplished scientists in their own right at 35, watched their mother with undisguised pride. Beside them sat Maxwell Westlake, now in his 70s, his health stabilized by the treatment that bore his name, his former ruthlessness tempered by years of reflection and the influence of the sons he had once rejected. As Rebecca concluded her address to thunderous applause, she caught Maxwell's eye. He nodded slightly, an acknowledgement of how far they had all come from that fateful day, when he had demanded she choose between her career and her unborn children. Have you ever witnessed the full circle of a life journey? That moment when you can stand at the summit and look back at the winding path that brought you there? Seeing how even the steepest climbs and darkest valleys served a purpose? Later, at the reception, a young researcher approached Rebecca nervously. Dr. Morgan, your work has been my inspiration since medical school. But I've always wondered, how did you find the courage to stand up to Westlake Pharmaceuticals when they tried to suppress your research? The odds seemed impossible. Rebecca smiled, glancing across the room where her sons were deep in conversation with a group of international health officials. The odds were impossible, she agreed. But sometimes the most powerful motivation comes from protecting something more important than yourself. The young woman followed her gaze to the twins. Your sons? They gave me a reason to fight that was bigger than my career or my research, Rebecca explained, and in doing so, they taught me that the false choices we're often presented with, family or work, compassion or progress, are just that, false. The most meaningful breakthroughs happen when we refuse to accept those limitations. As the reception continued, Rebecca found herself drawn to the terrace overlooking the city lights. The summit was being held in Singapore, a fitting location for the global health initiative that Morgan Westlake was launching, a program to bring genetic therapies to underserved populations across Southeast Asia. Admiring your handiwork? Maxwell's voice came from behind her. He moved more slowly now, with the aid of a sleek carbon fiber cane, but his mind remained as sharp as ever. Hardly my handiwork alone, Rebecca replied, making room for him at the railing. The Foundation's reach is largely due to Adrian's vision for global accessibility. And Aidan's insistence on ethical implementation, Maxwell added. They complement each other remarkably well. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, their decades-long journey from bitter enemies to cautious allies, to something approaching friends having softened the edges of their complicated history. I've been thinking about retirement, Maxwell said suddenly, stepping back from the Foundation entirely. Rebecca looked at him with surprise. Why now? The Asian initiative was your idea, and it's in capable hands. Maxwell gazed out at the city skyline. I've spent the last decade trying to balance the scales for my past actions. At some point, I need to accept that the work will continue without me, perhaps better without the shadow of my former reputation. Rebecca studied him thoughtfully. The arrogant, controlling man who had once given her an impossible ultimatum had been gradually replaced by someone more reflective, more aware of his limitations. The change hadn't been sudden or complete. There were still moments when his old ruthlessness surfaced, but it was genuine nonetheless. The twins will miss your input, she said finally. Whatever our past, you've been a meaningful presence in their adult lives. Maxwell's expression softened. They've been the redemption I never deserved, as have you, in your way. I didn't do it for your redemption, Rebecca reminded him. I know, he acknowledged, which is precisely why it worked. Their conversation was interrupted by Aidan's arrival on the terrace. At 35, he had grown into a thoughtful, deliberate man whose quiet brilliance complemented his brother's more dynamic approach. The Marfan-Westlake syndrome that had threatened his life had been successfully managed through the treatment his mother developed, though he still required regular monitoring. There you both are, he said. Adrian's about to announce the first implementation sites for the Asian initiative. As they followed Aidan back inside, Rebecca reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. The frightened young researcher who had fled Boston with nothing but her unborn children and her determination had never imagined standing here, 28 years later, watching those children transform global medicine. Sometimes our greatest fears become the doorways to our most meaningful achievements. What terrifies us today may be the foundation of tomorrow's triumph. Adrian's announcement was met with enthusiasm from the international delegates. The initiative would begin with clinics in 5 countries, bringing genetic testing and treatment to communities where such advanced care had been previously unimaginable. The funding structure, an innovative blend of foundation support, government partnerships, and a sliding-scale payment system, reflected the Morgan Westlake philosophy that medical breakthroughs belong to humanity, not just to those who could afford them. As the summit concluded the following day, Rebecca found herself approached by a woman in her early 30s, her professional demeanor not quite hiding her nervousness. Dr. Morgan, I'm Dr. Lian Chen from Beijing Medical University. I've been following your work for years, but I'm actually here about a personal matter. Rebecca smiled encouragingly. How can I help you, Dr. Chen? The young woman hesitated. I'm pregnant, she said finally, and my research institution has made it clear that if I continue with the pregnancy, my position on the advanced genetics team will be reconsidered. They say the timing is impossible with our current research timeline. Rebecca felt a jolt of recognition. The same impossible choice she had faced all those years ago. now being presented to another promising young scientist. "What does your heart tell you?" she asked gently. "That I want both, doctor," Chen admitted. "My research is important. We're close to a breakthrough on early detection of genetic disorders. But this child..." Her hand moved instinctively to her stomach. "I already love this child." Rebecca nodded. "Then perhaps the question isn't which to choose, but how to create a path that honors both." "Is that possible?" Dr. Chen asked, hope and doubt warring in her expression. "It won't be easy," Rebecca acknowledged. "But yes, it's possible. And you don't have to do it alone." She reached for her business card and wrote a personal email address on the back. "Contact me. The Morgan Westlake Foundation has a program specifically for supporting researchers facing these challenges. We can discuss options, from flexible research arrangements to potential positions within our organization." Dr. Chen's eyes widened. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" "Because 28 years ago, I was you," Rebecca said simply, "and I had to forge that path alone. No one should have to make that choice without support." As Dr. Chen walked away, visibly moved, Adrian approached his mother. "Recruiting more brilliant scientists?" he asked with a smile. "Something like that," Rebecca replied, "ensuring the next generation doesn't face the same false choices we did." Adrian nodded thoughtfully. "You know, we're expanding the Foundation's fellowship program next year. We could formalize what you just offered, create a specific track for researchers facing family-related career interruptions." "The Rebecca Morgan Fellowship," Maxwell suggested, joining them with Aiden at his side. "Seems fitting." Rebecca shook her head. "No. The New Path Fellowship. Because that's what it's really about. Creating new paths where the old systems present only dead ends." The idea took root immediately. By the time they returned to Boston, Adrian and Aiden had already drafted a proposal for the new program, with input from both Rebecca and Maxwell. The New Path Fellowship would provide financial support, flexible research arrangements, and mentorship for scientists facing significant life challenges, not just pregnancy but also family caregiving responsibilities, personal health crises, and other circumstances that traditionally derailed promising careers. If you're still watching, you understand something profound, that our most painful experiences often become the seeds of our greatest contributions. Rebecca's impossible choice became the foundation for helping others avoid that same painful dilemma. 6 months later, Dr. Lian Chen became the fellowship's first recipient, continuing her genetic research remotely while preparing for her child's birth. Within 3 years, the program had expanded to support over 50 researchers worldwide, creating a new model for scientific careers that acknowledged the full humanity of those pursuing breakthrough discoveries. On a crisp autumn morning, as Rebecca walked through the Morgan Westlake campus in Boston, she paused to watch a group of fellowship recipients gathered for their quarterly symposium. Among them was Dr. Chen, now balancing her toddler on her hip while discussing research findings with colleagues. The scene embodied everything Rebecca had fought for. The recognition that brilliant minds didn't cease to be brilliant when they became parents, that compassion and scientific progress could advance hand in hand. "Quite a legacy," observed Eliza Chen, now in her 80s but still serving as an advisor to the foundation. She had joined Rebecca for her morning walk, their decades-long friendship having deepened through all the transformations of their professional lives. "It's still evolving," Rebecca replied. "That's what makes it meaningful." "Have you given any thought to your own next chapter?" Eliza asked. "You've been talking about stepping back from day-to-day operations for years." Rebecca smiled. "Actually, I have some news on that front. I've accepted a position with the World Health Organization, Special Advisor on Genetic Therapy Implementation in Developing Regions. It's part-time, which will allow me to continue my research while sharing what we've learned about making advanced treatments accessible." "And the twins? How do they feel about your new adventure?" "They're supportive," Rebecca said. "They've been running most of the Foundation's operations for years anyway, and they have their own exciting developments." Indeed, both Adrian and Aiden had continued to forge their own paths while building on the foundation their mother had established. Adrian had recently married Dr. Sophia Patel, a brilliant neurologist he'd met through the Foundation's work. Aiden, more private by nature, had channeled his experience with Marfan-Westlake syndrome into a patient advocacy role alongside his research, becoming a trusted voice for those navigating rare genetic disorders. As for Maxwell, he had made good on his intention to step back from the foundation, though he remained available for consultation when needed. His relationship with the twins had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Not the close father-son bond that might have developed had circumstances been different, but a respectful connection based on shared values and mutual recognition of both past mistakes and present possibilities. That evening, Rebecca hosted a small dinner at her home to celebrate her new WHO appointment. The gathering included Eliza, the twins, and Sophia, and a few close colleagues from the foundation. Maxwell had been invited but sent his regrets. He was undergoing a scheduled treatment that week and preferred to rest. As they enjoyed dessert on Rebecca's terrace overlooking the Charles River, Aidan raised his glass. To Mom, who taught us that the most important breakthroughs happen when someone has the courage to say both instead of either or. And to new paths, Adrian added, for all those who will follow. Rebecca looked around at the faces of those she loved most. Her sons, now accomplished men, who carried forward her vision while creating their own. Eliza, who had stood by her through the darkest times. And the extended family of colleagues who shared her commitment to science in service of humanity. I've been thinking a lot about choices lately, she said. About that moment on the cliff when I decided to keep you both, despite everything Maxwell threatened. She smiled at the twins. It felt impossible then, like I was choosing between my life's work and my children. But what I've come to understand is that the most meaningful paths often begin with rejecting the limitations others place on our choices. You created a third option, Sophia observed, when everyone said there were only two, and in doing so, changed not just your own life but countless others, Eliza added. Later, after the guests had departed, Rebecca stood alone on her terrace, watching the city lights reflect on the river. Her phone buzzed with a text from Maxwell. Heard your dinner was a success. Congratulations on the WHO position. You've earned it. She smiled slightly at the message, another small marker of how far they had all come from that confrontation in his penthouse 35 years ago. She typed back, "Thank you. How are you feeling after the treatment?" His reply came quickly. "Better than I deserve to. Your research continues to keep me alive despite my best efforts to the contrary all those years ago." Rebecca could almost hear the wry self-deprecation in his tone. Maxwell had never become a warm or demonstrative man, but he had developed a capacity for honest self-reflection that would have been unimaginable in his younger years. She responded, "Science doesn't concern itself with what we deserve, only with what's possible." "A philosophy you've applied to more than medicine," came his reply. "Rest well, Rebecca. The world is better for your stubborn refusal to accept limitations." As she prepared for bed that night, Rebecca found herself thinking about the young woman she had once been, terrified, facing an impossible choice, standing on a cliff edge with tears streaming down her face. If she could somehow reach back through time and speak to that younger self, what would she say? Perhaps simply this: trust yourself. The path forward isn't either or. It's both, and. It's creating something new when the existing options fail. It's recognizing that the most valuable breakthroughs often come not from accepting the world as it is, but from imagining what it could be. The following morning, Rebecca woke early and drove to the coast. The cliff where she had once stood, contemplating her impossible choice, was now part of a nature preserve, the view of the ocean unchanged, despite all the transformations in her life. She stood at the edge, feeling the wind in her hair, watching the sunrise paint the water in shades of gold and pink. 28 years ago, she had stood in a similar spot, clutching a positive pregnancy test, tears streaming down her face as she faced what seemed like the end of everything she had worked for. Maxwell's ultimatum had felt like an impassable barrier, her career or her children, with no third option possible. But she had created that third option through sheer determination, courage, and the unwavering belief that both her work and her children mattered. That decision had set in motion a chain of events that transformed not just her own life, but the entire landscape of medical research and treatment accessibility. As Rebecca turned to leave, she noticed a young woman sitting on a nearby bench, gazing out at the ocean with a troubled expression. Something in her posture, the weight of decision, the burden of choice, struck a chord of recognition. Rebecca hesitated, then approached. "Beautiful morning," she offered gently. The woman looked up, startled. "Yes," she agreed. attempting a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I come here sometimes when I need to make difficult decisions, Rebecca said. Something about the vastness of the ocean puts problems into perspective. The woman nodded. I'm hoping for some perspective myself. She hesitated, then added, I just found out I'm pregnant. The timing couldn't be worse. I'm in the middle of my medical residency, specializing in pediatric oncology. My program director has made it clear that taking time off would mean starting over. Rebecca felt a profound sense of déjà vu. And you're trying to decide what to do? Everyone says I have to choose, the woman admitted. My career or this baby. There doesn't seem to be a third option. Rebecca sat down beside her. What if I told you there is always a third option? It might not be obvious, and it certainly won't be easy, but it exists. The woman looked at her skeptically. You sound very certain. Because 28 years ago, I sat where you're sitting now, Rebecca said. I was a researcher on the verge of a breakthrough. My boss, who was also the father, told me I had to terminate or lose everything I'd worked for. Recognition dawned in the young doctor's eyes. You're Dr. Rebecca Morgan. Rebecca nodded. I am. We studied your cancer treatment protocol in medical school, the woman said with growing excitement. And your work on genetic therapies is why I went into pediatric oncology. I never knew about the personal side of your story. Few people did, for many years, Rebecca acknowledged. But yes, I chose to continue my pregnancy, twins, as it turned out, and rebuild my career on my own terms. It wasn't the path I had planned, but it led to breakthroughs I might never have achieved otherwise. The young doctor looked down at her hands. I want both, my career and this baby. But everyone tells me it's impossible. They told me the same thing, Rebecca said with a smile. Proving them wrong became one of my greatest motivations. She reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. The Morgan Westlake Foundation has a program specifically for medical professionals in your situation. Call this number. Tell them I sent you. The woman accepted the card with trembling fingers. Thank you, she whispered. For this, and for everything your work has done for my patients. As Rebecca walked back to her car, she felt a sense of completion. The circle that had begun with her own impossible choice had expanded to encompass countless others, researchers, doctors, patients, and families whose lives had been transformed not just by her scientific breakthroughs, but by her refusal to accept false limitations. If you've ever stood at a crossroads where all paths seem to demand unbearable sacrifice, Rebecca's story offers a powerful truth. Sometimes the most courageous choice is to forge an entirely new path where none existed before. The Morgan Westlake Foundation celebrated its 30th anniversary with a global symposium that brought together scientists, patients, and advocates from around the world. The event's theme, Beyond Either, or Creating New Possibilities in Medicine and Life, reflected the philosophy that had guided the organization from its inception. Adrian and Aidan, now 40, had taken full leadership of the foundation and the company, each bringing their unique strengths to the enterprise. Adrian's visionary approach to global health access had expanded the foundation's reach to over 70 countries. Aidan's meticulous research had led to breakthroughs in treating not just Marfan-Westlake syndrome, but a spectrum of related genetic disorders. Rebecca, at 72, had scaled back her professional commitments, but remained an influential voice in global health policy. Her work with the WHO had helped establish new protocols for implementing advanced treatments in resource-limited settings, ensuring that medical innovations reached those who needed them most, not just those who could afford them. Maxwell Westlake, now 80, attended the anniversary celebration in a wheelchair, his health finally beginning to fail, despite the treatments that had extended his life far beyond what would have been possible without Rebecca's research. The years had softened the animosity between them, replacing it with a complex respect born of shared purpose, if not shared methods. I never thought I'd live to see this, Maxwell commented as Rebecca joined him at his table during the gala dinner. 30 years of the foundation. 40 years since that day in my office when I gave you that ultimatum. Life has a way of surprising us, Rebecca replied, taking the seat beside him, especially when we refuse to accept the limitations others try to impose. Maxwell nodded, his once sharp gaze now clouded, but still perceptive. You know, I've had a lot of time to think about why I reacted the way I did when you told me you were pregnant. It wasn't just about the company or the research timeline. Oh? Rebecca raised an eyebrow, curious despite herself. I was terrified, Maxwell admitted, his voice low. My father died young from the same condition I have. I grew up watching him deteriorate, knowing the same fate likely awaited me. The thought of passing that on to a child. He shook his head. I convinced myself I was being rational, practical, but I was just afraid. Fear makes us do terrible things sometimes, Rebecca acknowledged, but it can also be overcome. You weren't afraid? I was terrified, Rebecca corrected him, but not of the same things. I was afraid of losing my research, my career, my purpose. But somehow, the thought of losing those babies, even before I knew they were twins, was more frightening still. Maxwell was quiet for a moment, watching Adrian and Aiden move through the crowd, greeting guests, and discussing the Foundation's work with easy confidence. They got the best of both of us, he said finally. Your courage, my determination, but none of my cowardice. They made their own way, Rebecca said. We just gave them the starting points, you with your genes, me with my values. And your treatment, Maxwell added. Without which, Aiden might not be standing there today. Nor I, for that matter. The treatment was always going to happen, Rebecca said. It was the logical extension of my research. The fact that it helped both of you was serendipitous. Maxwell smiled faintly. Still unwilling to admit you might have saved my life intentionally? Some mysteries should remain unsolved, Rebecca replied with a small smile of her own. Across the room, Adrian tapped a glass for attention. The crowd quieted as he took the stage, joined by Aiden. 30 years ago, Adrian began, our mother made a choice that changed not just her life and ours, but ultimately the lives of millions around the world. She refused to accept that she had to choose between her children and her life's work. Instead, Aiden continued, she found a way to honor both, creating not just breakthrough treatments, but a new model for how scientific research can serve humanity. Tonight, Adrian said, we're announcing the establishment of the Rebecca Morgan Institute for Ethical Innovation, a global think tank dedicated to developing frameworks that balance scientific advancement with human values. Rebecca felt tears spring to her eyes as the crowd erupted in applause. She hadn't known about this initiative. The twins had kept it a carefully guarded secret. And, Aiden added when the applause subsided, we're equally proud to announce the Maxwell Westlake Scholarship for Second Chances, a program specifically designed for those seeking to redirect their careers toward humanitarian applications of science and medicine. Maxwell's surprise was evident. He looked at Rebecca questioningly. Don't look at me, she said. This is entirely their doing. As the twins continued outlining the new initiatives, Maxwell leaned toward Rebecca. They found a way to honor both of us, despite everything. They've always been better than either of us at seeing beyond false dichotomies, Rebecca replied. At finding the both, and instead of the either-or, the celebration continued late into the night, with testimonials from patients whose lives had been saved by the Foundation's work, researchers whose careers had been supported by its fellowships, and communities transformed by its health initiatives. Through it all, Rebecca observed with quiet pride, not just in what she had accomplished, but in what her sons had built upon that foundation. As the event wound down, Adrian and Aiden joined their parents at the table, bringing with them Dr. Lian Chen, now the director of the Foundation's Asia-Pacific Division, and her 12-year-old daughter, Min. Dr. Morgan, Lian said warmly, I wanted Min to meet you. I've told her your story many times, but she wanted to thank you herself. The girl stepped forward shyly. My mother says I exist because of you, she said. Because you showed her she didn't have to choose between being a scientist and being a mom. Rebecca smiled, deeply touched. Your mother made that choice herself. I just helped her see it was possible. But someone had to be first, Min insisted with the clear logic of childhood. Someone had to show it could be done. I suppose that's true, Rebecca acknowledged. Though I wasn't thinking about changing the world at the time. I was just trying to save my babies and my research. That's often how the most important changes happen, Maxwell observed unexpectedly. Not through grand plans to reshape the world, but through individual acts of courage in the face of impossible choices. The twins exchanged surprised glances at this philosophical turn from their father, but nodded in agreement. Which reminds me, Adrian said, we have one more announcement that we wanted to share privately before making it public. The foundation is establishing a presence in Harbor Point, Aiden explained. We're converting the cottage where we grew up into a retreat center for scientists and their families, a place where they can work and recover during difficult career transitions or health challenges. We're calling it the third option, Adrian added with a smile, in honor of where it all began. Rebecca felt a wave of emotion. Harbor Point had been their refuge, their hiding place, but also the birthplace of her independent research and the twins' earliest memories. That it would now serve others facing similar challenges seemed perfectly fitting. I think that's wonderful, she said simply, too moved for more elaborate words. Later that night, as Rebecca prepared for bed in her hotel suite, she found herself reflecting on the long, strange journey from that cliff edge 40 years ago to this moment of culmination and continuation. The frightened young researcher with the positive pregnancy test could never have imagined the legacy that would grow from her refusal to accept an impossible choice. Her phone chimed with a text message from an unknown number. Turn on the news, Channel 7. Curious, Rebecca switched on the television to find breaking news about a major pharmaceutical scandal. Novartis, the company Maxwell had falsely claimed, was close to competing with her research all those years ago, had been exposed for suppressing data about dangerous side effects in one of their flagship drugs. The whistleblower was a pregnant researcher who had been threatened with termination when she raised concerns. Another text came through. History repeats, but sometimes with different endings. Your foundation should reach out to Dr. Kamala Patel. She'll need support. Rebecca stared at the message, wondering who had sent it. The number wasn't familiar, but the timing and knowledge suggested someone connected to the industry. Perhaps one of Eliza's contacts, or even James Harrington, though he had passed away several years earlier. She made a note to have Adrian contact Dr. Patel in the morning, another scientist facing an impossible choice, another opportunity to create a third option where the existing system presented only dead ends. As she drifted toward sleep, Rebecca found herself thinking about all the women who would come after her. Brilliant minds facing the false choice between their work and their families, their ambitions, and their humanity. Thanks to the foundation and the example she had set, many would find support and pathways that hadn't existed before. But there would always be new barriers, new impossible choices requiring new courage to overcome. The work wasn't finished. Perhaps it never would be. But each time someone refused to accept the limitations imposed by others, the path became a little wider, a little clearer for those who would follow. The next morning, Rebecca joined her sons for breakfast before they all departed for their respective homes and responsibilities. As they shared a final cup of coffee, Aiden asked the question that had been on his mind since the previous evening. Mom, after all these years, do you ever regret the choice you made? Not keeping us, obviously, he added hastily, but choosing the harder path, going it alone instead of doing what Maxwell wanted? Rebecca considered the question carefully. There were moments, late nights when you both had fevers, and I was trying to work on research at the same time, or when I saw colleagues advancing in traditional career paths while I was struggling to build something new. But regret? No. Because the path I chose wasn't just about having both my children and my career. It was about creating something better than either of those things would have been separately. The third option, Adrian said with a nod. Exactly, Rebecca agreed. Not just a compromise between two existing choices, but something entirely new. That's the real legacy I hope I've left. Not just the treatments or the foundation, but the example that when the world presents you with an impossible choice, sometimes the most courageous response is to reject the premise entirely and create your own path forward. As they parted ways at the hotel entrance, Rebecca embraced each of her sons, these remarkable men, who had begun as tiny heartbeats on an ultrasound screen and grown into leaders, transforming global medicine. I'm proud of you both, she said simply. Not just for what you've accomplished, but for who you've become. We had a good example, Aiden replied, his quiet voice carrying the depth of feeling he rarely expressed openly. The best, Adrian agreed. You showed us that courage isn't about fearlessness. It's about moving forward even when you're terrified. As Rebecca watched them drive away, she felt a profound sense of peace. The journey that had begun with an impossible choice had led to places she could never have imagined. There had been hardships and sacrifices along the way, moments of doubt and fear, but never regret. She had been told to end her pregnancy or end her career. Instead, she had forged a third path that honored both her children and her calling, transforming not just her own life, but countless others in the process. As we close this chapter, who still hasn't subscribed? If Rebecca's journey inspired you even a little, hit subscribe now, like the video, share it with someone who needs courage today, and comment, "Strength creates miracles." And before you go, seriously, who watched this entire story without subscribing? If you're still here, it means the story moved you. Don't leave without joining this community. Subscribe, and tell us in the comments, what would you have chosen if you were Rebecca? Your answer might help someone else make a brave decision.